If you're buying a domain name for a personal brand, a website, a business website, or anything else, your domain name can land into a lot of trouble if you don't follow these steps that are outlined in this video. Let's start with the first one. Step number one is to always check your domain name's history, what it is actually used for, because the history of the domain can affect its current use and whatever benefits you expect to derive of it. For example, you can go to archive.org and check what the domain name looked like previously, or say 5 years down the line. And apart from the history of the domain name, where it was used for, you should also check if the domain name was associated with any kind of activities that can harm your Google rankings or just the general reputation. More specifically, you should check for spammy content, scams, illegal content, or any objectionable content. If the domain name was used for any of these content, it'll hurt your reputation and your rankings in the long run. So it's better to stay away from it. And the resources that are just shared on the screen are resources you can use to go and check your domain name history. They'll also be linked in the description of the video, so make sure to check them out. The next important thing to look out for is legal and trademark trouble. Let me tell you a story. You might not know about an innocent software developer that actually landed in trouble with Microsoft over a domain name. The reason for the trouble was his name was Micro. So he obviously thought, hey, I should just make a website called Microsoft.com. And that is where the trouble happened. Because Microsoft obviously sounds very much like Microsoft. Microsoft actually sued, and then it became a huge legal battle. In the end, this conflict ended well, but not all conflicts about trademark and domain name and legal issues end well. So it's better to take precaution rather than regretting it later. So what you should do is double check if there are any legal actions on the domain name, and also check if any trademark issues can arise in the future. By checking for trademark registry, every country has their own resources. So better to check with an IP lawyer if you're serious about building or using the domain name for a long-term brand. And this will help you prevent any kind of trademark issues and legal trouble down the road. The next important thing to do with your domain name is something what I call the speak test. You probably have observed your own patterns changing when it comes to searching. Earlier, it was all typing everything out. But now we're used to watching videos, we're used to typing, or not typing, but actually using a voice to type. I personally use ChatGPT quite a lot. Instead of typing everything, I just use my voice mode and just say everything that I want to. And that's how I usually search in Google and ChatGPT as well. Now, this is important to understand because if your domain name is not easy to speak, or has a complicated spelling, or it cannot be heard or interpreted over the phone or to someone in person, then it's probably quite a complicated domain name. So what you should do is try to just call a friend and say, hey, I'm thinking of buying this domain name, and this is the domain name. What do you think the spelling is like? And if they're not able to interpret it or not able to spell it out correctly, then probably something you should consider. And you can also do a voice search in popular search engines like Google, ChatGPT, any other AI tool that you like, any other LLM, and make sure that the interpretation of how the spelling should be like, or the domain name you're considering, is appearing accurately in search. Because most people, when they maybe see your website, or they saw an ad where you're talking about something, or some piece of content that you produce, and they might just be willing to search for it by saying stuff. So if the domain name is misspelled by the search engines, then you probably lose a lot of traffic. So it's better to have a simple domain name which is easy to spell, has no misspellings or no complicated spellings or like misspellings, keywords, and everything else. Just keep it simple, make it easy to spell, make it easy to recall, and make it easy to interpret over the phone and on voice search. And that would probably be a much better decision over the long run. The next important consideration to have when buying a domain name is social media availability. Now, domain names are not the only properties that you need to control over the long run if you want to grow your business. You obviously need some sort of social media. It might be TikTok, YouTube, Pinterest, or Instagram, or any other platform that is cool. Now, if your domain name is taken everywhere, so example, you bought a really good domain name, you paid a fair price for it, but you go and check that, hey, every platform has already taken the username, or the username is already taken, then it might be a big bummer. Because now you might have to fight a battle, or you might have to choose a weird variation of the domain name for your own handle. And then people looking at your handle might think that, is this a replica of this handle, or is this the original one? So that basically becomes a huge problem or a long-term issue. So it's better to also do the research upfront, going on all social media platforms. And they're pretty sure there are plenty of tools out there. I'll probably put something on the screen, which you can just enter your handle and it'll search for all search engines, or it will basically act as a search engine for all social media platforms and give you a report that, hey, your handle or your domain name, what you're thinking of buying, or is available on these social media platforms and not available on these social media platforms. So based on that, you can decide that, hey, I need to be present on Instagram. So if I don't get the handle, I'll probably have to look for some other maybe domain name. So this will help you make the decision. And basically in the long run, you'll have control over how your brand is represented across all social media platforms. The next important thing to consider with your domain name is checking if you're paying a fair price. Now, this might not apply if you're just buying a very generic domain name and it's not a premium domain name, because premium domain names cost a little different, or I say premium, compared to regular domain names. And regular domain names are, well, technically cheap and affordable. For example, if you are building a website or thinking about building a website, all you have to do is just go to the link in the description. I'll place a link here. And Bluehost, if you purchase hosting for an entire year, which is very affordable, they'll give you a domain name for free. Now, of course, that will be a regular domain name. So it can be bundled in your, let's say, the hosting package. But if you're buying a premium domain name, which is a single word domain name or something that's in demand, you might need to pay a premium price. So how do you actually determine if the price you are willing to pay for the domain name is actually fair? Now, there are several tools out there that can give you an estimate of the price, but no tool can give you a 100% accurate number. So it's better to go to a different tool, and I'll share some of these in the description and also as B-roll on top, so that you can just go and check, hey, what's the fair pricing of this? And of course, there are a lot of domain brokers available in the market as well. So you can go to a domain broker and just maybe get a consult about, hey, I'm willing to pay this much. Is it a fair price? And they might just broker a better price for you through other means. So you'll save some money and also rest assured that you're paying a fair price for your domain name. The next important thing to consider can save you a lot of headache in the long run. And it's called typo squatting and also TLD squatting. Now, what typo squatting means that, for example, if you had facebook.com or you were buying facebook.com, somebody just buys facebook.com, something that's spelled very similar, and to the general eye, they might not even notice it. And if you pronounce it, it does sound like facebook.com. And somebody might just buy the domain name just for kicks, or like, hey, it was available, so I just bought it. This can be a huge problem. And also a TLD squatting. For example, I live in India. Most common domain name or TLD here is .in. So if I'm thinking of taking or building an international business and I buy a .com domain, somebody who has malicious intent or just out of spite or just, I'd say, innocently just buys the .in version of my domain name. And this has personally happened to me. I had the .in domain name for a website that I was running, and I could not get the .com version because just somebody was squatting on it. So before you make a purchase or before you decide to buy a domain name, it's always worthwhile to check if somebody is trying, or it basically exists in the market, that nobody has a very similar sounding domain name. And if it's in your budget, then I would recommend at least buy the top 5 TLDs. So .com and whatever your country is. For example, India would be .in, .co.in. So I'd probably buy and hold the top 5 TLDs just to stay safe, so that no other people, or basically no other person, can actually buy it. So this will save you a long-term headache, because if you've been building your website for a couple of years and just realize that a lot of your traffic is going to some squatting domain name, you'd probably be disappointed. So better to check this out and then avoid this in the future. The next important point will also save you a lot of headache when building a website. Now imagine this, you check the history, you check for spam content, check for everything else, and you think, hey, this is a great domain, I'll buy it. You set up your website, you spend months on it, you spend a lot of money on it, and then you start, hey, my business is live. And then you start sending some emails and you notice none of your emails are getting delivered to your customers or potential customers. What's happening? So your website might, or the domain name that you just bought might have been perfect and the content might have been great, but it might be associated with a lot of email spam. So your deliverability or deliverability might have been just completely short. So not only should you check the history of the domain name when it comes to spammy content, bad content, illegal content, and everything else I described, you should also check out if your domain name was used for excessive spam on emails. The couple of tools out there, I'll show something on the screen. I think it's called mxtoolbox.com. And that's one way to understand if your domain name was used for email spam. So make sure to clear your domain name for this as well. Otherwise, you might land in trouble later when you try to send out emails from your domain name. And the last important point, as a bonus, I'd like to share something that can save you money on the long run. And that is to always check your renewal cost. Because a lot of hosting providers do provide a domain name for absolutely free, but they will charge you eventually. It might be a 3-year deal, 2-year deal, 1-year deal, but eventually domain names are not free. So you might have to pay maybe today, maybe 6 months down the line, or maybe 1 year down the line. One thing to always keep in mind is be consciously aware about how much will the renewal fees be. So let's say I give you a domain name for free today, and then next year I say, hey, now if you pay me $5,000 a year for the domain name, you'd probably be surprised and say, hey, I've been conned. So always check whatever the terms and conditions are of the deal you're buying. So if you have renewal from the hosting provider directly, or if you're buying a domain name from a domain registrar, always understand what the renewal costs are going to be like. And sometimes the renewal cost does matter, or at least it goes up over the long term. For example, you might pay 20% more in a couple of years. But if it's going 100% over a year, 300%, then that's a sign of trouble that you might just be paying way too much for this domain name. So I'm not saying you don't pay for domain names. You can always obviously pay what you think is a fair price, but being aware about the situation that, hey, I'm going to have to pay a bigger price later down the line is something that you should be consciously aware of. Otherwise, it might surprise you later with a nice long bill, which you might not be prepared for. So those are the 8 important things you need to keep in mind and do before you decide to buy a domain name. What do you think about this video? Was it helpful? Then just hit a like and subscribe to our channel as well. You're watching Yuvraj from W Beginner. I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.